if I told you we were putting a team together? Who's we?
I have a team of 21 right now for Validate. It's a pretty big team. It's a crazy big team.
White men, cis white men, were not interested in the work that Sweet Baby Inc. put into for something that was already created.
And if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them.
Maybe say, we don't want you around if you're gonna be a
Yeah.
And I wish I could turn the camera around so that you could see the incredible team that make X-Play. Half of our producers and writers are women. Emily, Abby, Megan, Joe, Jake, Zipper, Gabby. It goes on and on and on.
We're looking for people who, non-binary, intersex, trans, who aren't just white, they look like me and you.
All people of color. We have no white people on our team. I did that because I wanted to create this safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
And if you have a problem with that, come fight me. Physically. Bitch.
Hey everybody, gaming is really going through it right now. There's this huge duality where Summer Games Fest just came and went with quite a few exciting surprises that have people really happy and hopeful for what's coming next. But then at the same time, there's bad news like the absolute cleanup that Xbox is doing in some of their studios, the steep price of the Steam machine, and all the buzz from companies like Sony and Xbox looking to slow down and reconsider console production to instead replace it with cloud streaming services where you own nothing but keep paying the same exorbitant rising prices. It's a roller coaster. Today I wanted to talk about Xbox's layoffs, so they're going through a massive structural reorganization under their new CEO, Asha Sharma. The idea is that Xbox is shifting towards emphasizing their bigger franchises with money-making potential, like Fallout, Elder Scrolls, Halo, Gears of War, etc., while cutting down on smaller, potentially experimental titles, primarily from underperforming studios. As such, in recent times we've seen a number of shutdowns and cancellations from Xbox, even dating back a few months, like for example with Perfect Dark's reboot, which apparently spent years in development only to have very little palpable progress. And now we're getting a new wave of it where Compulsion Games, the developers behind South of Midnight, are getting nuked, and others are in trouble too, like Ninja Theory, developers of Hellblade, and Double Fine, which are the developers of Psychonauts. Now why the title of the video? And what's the point? Well, usually, when stuff like this goes down, everyone is sad and really somber about it. It's like, oh man, this is so terrible. Because of course layoffs suck, studio shutdowns can be quite traumatic. And so when stuff like this happens and people see other people, including myself sometimes, just online going, rip bozo, they get upset. Very upset, honestly. Oh, they straight up lose it, going off like, oh, you piece of shit, how could you say that, you're scum, who would celebrate such an awful thing as people losing their livelihoods, like these people are jobless now, etc, 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 etc. You guys get the gist of it. And so I thought I'd make this nice little chill video calmly explaining why that is. I think that once we go through Compulsion's history, especially after being acquired by Xbox, maybe some of you will change your minds, and even if you don't, even if you find it insensitive, maybe you will at least be able to see it from another perspective. Because as it is, it's just childish to not understand at least why these shutdowns are happening. The truth is that they were unavoidable. We've been calling it for years. Their business model is unsustainable, and so to have the gall to demand or request or whatever it is that a company like Xbox sustains them anyway by continuing to fund their failures is just stupid. Game development is not a charity. Although to be entirely honest, this isn't to say that part of the blame doesn't belong to Xbox too. They 100% share the blame in everything that's happening right now. In fact, I would even say that they are the main ones responsible, which is why I'd love to see big layoffs at Xbox. Not just these studios that they command, but their commanders themselves. All these little managers and shit that they have who, for years, made all these studio acquisitions and sat around while they produced nothing. 5, 6, 7-year development cycles for small projects, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of budget on mediocre releases, while also fostering a weak culture that is antithetical to what made Xbox grow in the first place. They're not only responsible for the failures that the studios under them produced, but also for neglecting Xbox's core audience as they chased a modern one instead. So let's get in there, but before we do, I just have one public service announcement. I intended on using some footage from a Compulsion game, but yeah, sorry fellas, it didn't pan out. And God knows I'm not about to buy South of Midnight, so enjoy an array of different footage from other games that I've been playing recently. I'll have their names on screen. Alright, that's it. Let's go. Let's take a look at Compulsion's history, given that they're one of the studios that just got nuked by Xbox. So, they start their journey in 2009 as a studio that supported other studios' game developments, something that's still very common today. In 2010, they establish a prototype for Contrast, their first game. Then in 2013, Contrast launches and wins the Most Innovative Game of the Year award at the Canadian Game Awards. At this time, Compulsion had 7 developers and worked in an office that leaked. So, 2015 comes along, 2 years later, and they already announced a new title named We Happy Few, along with a Kickstarter campaign to help fund it. It generated interest. I personally remember this and I was interested too, though I wasn't part of the Kickstarter, I was broke. They are now 12 developers and add another little personable detail that the heating in the office occasionally fails. 2016, 1 year later, they unveiled the intro of We Happy Few to the world during the Xbox showcase at E3. Man, E3, those were the days, huh? Anyway, the showcase goes well and they are now 25 developers, so far so good. But now we're about to enter the big leagues and simultaneously the shit show. 2 years later, in 2018, Microsoft acquires Compulsion Games back when they realized that they were losing the console war to PlayStation at a rate so insanely shameful that it's honestly mind-boggling. The way that Xbox fumbled the PS4 and Xbox One generation should be a case study for business. Xbox's exclusives were so far behind that they basically started buying up property and turning third-party IPs and studios into first-party Xbox exclusives that ended up not even being exclusive later. They acquired a lot of up-and-coming studios at the time. All in all, looking at it from a perspective of back then, these looked like big W acquisitions because they weren't of expensive established studios, they were cheaper up-and-comers that were oozing potential, such as Compulsion here, who was making something quite ambitious with We Happy Few. Another big purchase around that time was Ninja Theory. I noticed that some people these days like to dunk on Hellblade, but back then the first Sanwa Hellblade was a big hit that generated a lot of buzz for the studio. It's not that Ninja Theory didn't already have a name on the map. As much flack as games like the Devil May Cry reboot got because of cringe, the truth is that they were admired for creating solid combat systems. But with Hellblade, there was much more buzz. It kinda was a game that played into the trend at the time, which was these games with heavier narrative and very good visuals, super tight motion capturing, and stories that try to tell something a little deeper than a more, I don't know, superficial fantasy-like plot. Of course, that trend would later overextend itself, and now we are at a point where we would trade overly emotional, overly serious, and overly realistic narrative-focused games with over-the-shoulder camera for some old-school action with just a group of dudes killing aliens or a medieval hero slaying monsters and saving the girl. Trends shift with time. It just is what it is. It's kinda like color schemes. Everyone used the piss filter, then everyone used the Fortnite filter, now everyone's using the purple neon filter or the default Unreal Engine photorealism shit, while guys like me are sitting here praying for a return to the piss filter again, so that I can at least wash down the monotony. But anyway, back to Xbox. They also acquired In Exile and Obsidian, which at the time looked like W purchases as well. These were studios that were still riding high on that thing where it's like they're small budget studios, but they have big potential. And in my mind, when Xbox was acquiring all of these studios, it was like a promise that all these little studios with high potential would now be able to make video games without being limited by budget because they would have Microsoft's money. Outside of that, they of course also bought Bethesda. Xbox is now the owner of Elder Scrolls and Fallout. These are now, they went from big third-party franchises that everyone could play into Xbox first franchises. And right now, we have Asha Sharma also making the move where she wants exclusives to be truly exclusive. So we may very well be entering an age where the future Fallout and Elder Scrolls game is actually going to be exclusive to the Xbox console without even a PC release, which honestly sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, but I guess we'll see. Either way, all of these lavish dreams of Xbox acquiring all these studios and having them go from making small games with potential to actual bangers that meet their potential never happened. All that money didn't make these studios make bigger bangers. If anything, it only made things worse, especially as the culture surrounding entertainment would enter this rotten age of oversensitivity and political correctness slipping into the games. Let's see that happen in real time right now. So, 2018 comes along, 2 years after their showcase of We Happy Few at E3. Compulsion Games is officially acquired by Microsoft to become part of Xbox Game Studios. They're still a small studio of 38 developers and things are looking bright. They also finally release We Happy Few to a mixed reception. We'll get there in a second. The game got banned in Australia as well because of course it did. I mean, Australia has essentially been colonized by Karens, so this is a natural occurrence with anything that isn't completely sanitized. And the reason why We Happy Few's release was rocky is a mix of elements. The gist of the game is that you live in Rainbow Land, and Rainbow Land requires people to take these joy pills that keep them all hopped up high all the time on, well, pure joy. It dulls their senses and their memories, so they keep living in a rainbow land where everyone is happy, cute, and friendly. Those pills act as a suppressant because in truth, that town is marred by horrible things that they did in the past. So anytime anyone skips their meds, they start to remember and become downers, bothering everyone with their questions and their negative feelings and their different opinions and all that bad stuff. So all the downers must obey and take the damn meds or they get the death penalty. Initially, this was the concept and it still made it to release. However, the first idea was that the game would be more of a sandbox survival game with various other elements. This changed over time, becoming instead a narrative-driven game with an actual story where the survival and the sandbox elements were severely watered down. This alone caused controversy, but on top of that, they also partnered with Gearbox instead of sticking exclusively to what they had with Kickstarter and their own personal funding, and this kicked the game's price from $30 to $60. And on top of that, it was also very buggy at launch. Needless to say, We Happy Few ended up being this game that is still very unique, no doubt about it, but that was certainly much more hyped in trailer reactions and showcases like E3 than actual successful at release. Regardless, Xbox had already acquired the studio, and so what was done was done. Now I really want you guys to pay attention. 2019 comes along, and they basically were releasing DLC content for We Happy Few while also patching it up. One of the DLCs got the game banned in Australia again, because of course. Now, we have a 3-year gap with nothing. The 2022 update reads, "Now at 80 developers, we move to a bigger office that no longer leaks. We are crafting new and strange adventures." In other words, they were crafting south of midnight. I'll remind you again that this update was given in 2022, and the last DLC for We Happy Few, which I believe was called something like We Fall Down, released in 2019. So for 3 years, they were doing whatever they were doing. Then, next update. 2023, now 4 years after the last piece of content for their last game, they announced South of Midnight, a brand new third-person action-adventure game set in the American Deep South. Explore the mythos of southern folklore and encounter exciting creatures in a fantastical world as Hazel. How exciting! 2024 comes along and they reveal gameplay of South of Midnight at the Xbox Games Showcase, along with a documentary giving a behind-the-scenes look into the game's development. Why did they ever think that this game needed a documentary for the development? I'll never know. Then in 2025, finally, the game launches in April. I think you guys already know how this one went. This game was one of those marred by controversy before it even came out, because it had unhinged people on the team. In this case, the community manager herself saying wild shit on X, saying she hates gamers, blatantly admitting she's an activist and wants to dump political bullshit into games, and even being openly racist against Asian and white people, which is peak 2024 and 2025. I mean, obviously, this didn't surprise anyone. In fact, during these dark ages of the 2020s, you would be encouraged to say garbage like this on social media. It gave you points within this circle of people. This controversy followed wherever the game went. Basically, put out a trailer and the controversy would come up, put out a new image or whatever, you guys get the point. There were also other funny things. For example, the original character was supposedly going to be a white, red-headed girl that they apparently changed later. They also, of course, worked with Sweet Baby Inc., with Kim Belair having had an involvement with the narrative and character direction. And then after that, there was another claim that I should warn you guys is unverified, which is that the game originally had a different voice actress who was given dialect coaching because she didn't sound black enough. Ultimately, she ended up being recast for that same reason. This is something that popped up by an anonymous source, so take it with a grain of salt, of course. Nobody at Compulsion or Xbox spoke out to deny it or confirm it, so I just don't know. What I do know is that this game was a massive flop. There's a lot of people who will try to cope and say otherwise because of course it won awards, including a Peabody Award for its cultural storytelling and handling of sensitive themes. P awards or not, the fact is that nobody bothered to buy the goddamn thing. It came and went like a fart in the wind, and I honestly heard much more about this game from content creators that people like to call grifters, such as Hypnotic, than any modern audience types or game journalists. Even Asmongold actually covered this game. Again, somebody who gets constantly called a chud or a grifter or a bigot, but at least he actually played the game. I never heard of this thing from anyone else, no modern audience types or game journals. Again, this came and went like a fart in the wind.
Hello lovelies, this is a shout out to my boy Asmongold. Seems very determined to make gaming a bit more of a toxic environment. I just know he's not a big fan of women or DEI. The one nice thing to having a creator like that is that typically they have a list of games that they don't want you to play. That list just tells me games that I probably should play. I was always going to play South of Midnight anyways, but now I definitely am. In fact, I'm very excited to. So come with me if you want to see what's got Asmongold's big boy panties all in a bunch.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
If not for the controversy, nobody would even be talking about it. Needless to say, this game put Compulsion in a lot of trouble, and that's the end of the Compulsion timeline on their own website. They got a thing where it says something like, oh, there's more stories to tell, but yeah, it doesn't seem like it. So now with the history of Compulsion out of the way, let's dive into how much of a shit show this is, and precisely why it's perfectly understandable for Xbox to close the studio down, and why so many people online just don't care. Again, Compulsion opened their doors in 2009 and do assistance work. In 2013 they put out their first game, it opens doors because it looked interesting. By 2015 they're out with a big new announcement. 1 year later in 2016 they already have some playable prototypes for their Kickstart supporters, and in 2018 the game fully launches despite the rocky development. 2013 we got Game 1, 2018, 5 years later we got Game 2. Yes, 5 years is quite a bit of time, time, but at least there was a big level of ambition with We Happy Few. Again, as I said before, it's the type of game where you're capable of getting investors or potential buyers like Xbox to even notice you. Plus, again, shaky development where the game changed quite a bit throughout. Then they get bought out by Xbox that same year and we get fucking nothing for 4 years, and only by 2023 do they reveal South of Mid. And then only 2 years after that does the game come out. Now, if this game was a much bigger and highly ambitious title, I would understand that. They're trying to make some big RPG or an immersive sim or something like that, I'd get it. Going back to We Happy Few, we're talking about a team at that time that was smaller than 38 devs during most of the development time, working on something with more intricate systems and open-ended gameplay that, again, later had to go through other changes. South of Midnight, on the other hand, it's just this. It looks like a bog-standard third-person action-adventure game. You jump around, you do little traversal things and mostly on-rail sections, you have some combat against mobs. It's simple, is what it is. That's it. And I don't want to undervalue the work it takes to make this. Don't get me wrong, I couldn't make this myself, but in comparison to what We Happy Few was trying to achieve, the amount of work that it took to put those systems together, South of Midnight is more of an on-rails project that costed them more money, and it was developed with like 3 times more people than the studio had making We Happy Few. They spent like $100 million on South of Midnight. It's the same type of issue Xbox apparently had with Perfect Dark, which was being made by the Initiative. They were toiling on that game for years, and of course, even if you're not doing anything special, even if you're not, I don't know guys, cranking up super magical graphics, you're still burning through a lot of money because if you have a lot of employees, you gotta pay them. So even if you're like toiling away for 5 or 6 years making a game that looks like a potato instead of looking like an artistic masterpiece, it's still going to cost you a lot of goddamn money. So apparently the word on the street is that that's what happened with Perfect Dark. A sinkhole for Xbox's money. A lot of it went in, but no product came out, so they cancelled the project and yoinked the studio. Coincidentally, the studio also had one of those unhinged weirdos who love to come out in public and make it known to the universe that they hate gamers. Hey fellow customers, f*** you. Sounds like a great business idea to me.
You know, a lot of people ask why. Why treat the customer this way? Why? Because fuck them, that's why.
Earlier in the video, I also mentioned that Ninja Theory is in trouble. Those are the developers of Hellblade. In their case, it's not because one of their games got cancelled along the way or anything like that, it's much the contrary. Hellblade 1 came out in 2017. Hellblade 2 came out in 2024. That's a 7-year gap. And then it's like, was Hellblade 2 this amazing sequel that improved in every single aspect and expanded the game into becoming so much more than the original? No, it was like 6 hours long, it was very linear, very narrative focused, you know, the usual. Of course, the visuals were now cranked up to 11,000, but yeah, I mean, that's it. 7 years of development for just that, for something so short and so insignificant that people really just weren't all that interested in paying for. Say what you will about Sony's first-party games, you know, and in this channel we criticize them a lot as well, but at least when they do sequels, they actually do sequels that feel like it. From God of War 4 to God of War Ragnarok, there was a big leap. From Horizon Zero Dawn to Horizon Forbidden West, another big leap. From Spider-Man to Spider-Man 2, another significant leap, not as big as the previous 2 ones. The only mainline one that I can say that didn't really do much of a leap at all was Ghost of Tsushima to Ghost of Yotei. And of course then there's a bunch of other examples that we can pull from third-party games. I don't want to make it sound like these types of issues are only an Xbox thing, you know, they're not. Obviously, other publishers suffer through the same kind of thing. For example, a studio was making a Black Panther game for, I believe, EA. It also had a bunch of years poured into its development, but apparently the progress on the game was so awful that they just pulled the plug. And guess what? That studio also had an unhinged developer who hates gamers and was racist.
I have a team of 21 right now for Validate. It's a pretty big team. It's a crazy big team for indie games. But who is your team? Validate has a team of mostly all people of color. We have no white people on our team. I did that because I wanted to create a safe environment. And I know the best way for an environment to be safe is to be around people who are just like me. And I'm not saying that white people in the industry are creating unsafe environments. I'm not saying that. That is not what I'm saying. I am saying that sometimes it is hard to work with white people because they think that something made okay, but it was really a microaggression. And no one wants to deal with that while they're trying to make a game that they love.
Man, you can really start drawing some lines on these charts, huh? Anyway, with Compulsion we see a similar thing to that. They took 7 years to make a mediocre game that frankly doesn't even scream Xbox first party material. There's a bunch of Xbox fans sitting around waiting for all these acquisitions that were made years ago to finally pay off by spawning generational games that appeal to them, that remind them of what Xbox was. But instead, they're getting shit like this while being battered by game journalists, executives and soy boy influencers into being positive about it so that the brand can survive. They keep being told that the shit that they remember fondly from that era during the 2000s to around 2013 is over, and that just doesn't work. I think there's room for small titles like these too. Anyone who had an Xbox 360 remembers how every now and then there'd be super fun games dropping into the Xbox arcade marketplace. But not at these budgets. And not while Xbox has nothing exciting on the main stage. And so, in closing, Compulsion was performing far better and making better games before the acquisition. After the acquisition, they... and please do pardon my French in this next section, but they dicked around for like 4 years without anyone even knowing what the fuck they were doing, only to announce a game that looks like it plays like fucking Diet Crash Bandicoot, except worse. Okay, maybe that was a little unfair of me. Like, the game isn't total dog shit, it's just painfully mid. Painfully mid and totally overpriced in terms of budget. It's just the kind of thing that is budgeted as a game that should have had the attention of many people, especially in its position at Xbox, but that is just so uninteresting. It's a niche game made with the budget of a blockbuster. And then 2 extra years to finally release it, and it's just a drop in the ocean. An extremely expensive one that can't even be scrapped into Game Pass slop to pad it out and make the subscription more alluring, because let's face it, nowhere near enough people were even interested in trying this game in the first place, and out of those that did try it, even less bothered to finish it or even get halfway into the game. The sad things that happen in these layoffs are, for example, how you can look at the game and note that it has really great artwork. It makes you feel bad for artists and reminds you that even in bad games, there's developers behind them who are very talented and don't deserve to be in this kind of position. But that's immediately contrasted by other things that are so rotten to the games industry that it once again just makes me go, what did you expect was going to happen, dumbass? Like, for example, why would you work with Sweet Baby Inc? If there's something that these hags have proved, it's that they're dog shit at their job. They don't know how to create compelling characters or narratives, they actively do the opposite. Sweet Baby Inc.'s function is to look at a game, right, and locate cool stuff. Then they go to that cool stuff and they take it out. Immediately, it's just like, yank that cool shit right out. Then they go to the team leads and they guide them into how to replace that cool stuff with cringe and garbage that nobody wants. And that's it, that's their entire job, it's to do that and then charge you for it. Then the studio gets a little star to help their ESG score because they hired these social-political sensitivity consultants to make sure that the game has the right kind of messages or representation in it, while also contributing to their global quotas. Oh sure, it helps studios with some benefits, but those benefits are obviously not enough in this medium. Games cost millions to make. This activism and social impact shit isn't enough to pay for it. A fucking donkey could understand and tell you that, so why did these studios cripple themselves for years by adhering to this? Why are some of them still doing so right now? And I have another question too, for the Compulsion and Xbox homies, because I'm genuinely curious. Why would you cripple yourselves by hiring unhinged racist activists who hate their own customers? Are you fucking stupid? What part of this was like a smart business decision? Is that it, by the way? Is that what they were doing during that big gap between the final piece of DLC content for We Happy Few and the announcement of South of Midnight? Were they doing like a whole countrywide interview process, looking to put together a team? A team of retards?
What if I told you we were putting a team together? Who's we?
I have a team of 21 right now for Validate. It's a pretty big team. It's a crazy big team.
White men, cis white men, were not interested in the work that Sweet Baby 8 put into for something that was already created. Like,
if you're a creative working in AAA, which I did for many, many years, put this stuff up to your higher-ups, and if they don't see the value in what you're asking for when you ask for consultants, when you ask for research, go have a coffee with your marketing team and just terrify them with the possibility of what's going to happen if they don't give you what you want.
Maybe say, we don't want you around if you're going to be and hateful. And that the games industry is diverse naturally. Not because anyone's making them be diverse, because the world is diverse, stupid mother.
I'll receive special flame just for being a woman. And I wish I could turn the camera around so that you could see the incredible team that make X-Play. Half of our producers and writers are women. Emily, Abby, Megan, Joe, Jake, Zipper, Gabby. It goes on and on and on.
Howdy y'all. Thank you for joining me today for some gospel music. Y'all know I'm fixing to be the #1 gospel music channel here on the YouTube, but it's just so gosh darn difficult with all them AI automatic made YouTube channels.
Saying I would definitely like to see more queer characters of color, not just just a white queer character. I would like to see more people that look like me.
And if you have a problem with that, come fight me. Physically, bitch.
We're looking for people who, non-binary, intersex, trans, who aren't just white, they look like me and you. As people of color, we have to exist within the framework of America's just like capitalistic, colonialistic framework. That's whiteness is the standard.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
And I know the best way for environments to be safe is to be around people who are just like me.
You're in our DMs or on those YouTube comments or in Twitch chat right now, those reactionary threads, thinking that I'm somehow ruining your current X-Play experience because you can't objectify me how you previously did to Morgan, or that I'm somehow less qualified to speak on something, but you can't quite put your finger on why. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Peace!
Is that it? Is that what was happening during that time? Well, either way, it's just not sustainable. The truth is, fellas, I talk a big game sometimes, but I do understand genuine diversity in game development. Like, I'm not a moron. I know that there'll never be a game studio where everyone thinks the exact same way that I do. Hell, there's never even going to be a game studio where everyone thinks the same as everyone else in the same studio. That was the beauty of gaming before this god-awful dark age of political correctness, oversensitivity, ideological purity testing, etc. It's that you could have like 400 people making a game, and those 400 people would all have diversity of thought, but none of it would creep into the games in a radicalized or activistic way. Not into the game, nor the game's community management or anything like that. They were all just locked in, doing their jobs, making a video game. It's like you come to work and you leave everything else at home and everyone can just coexist and engage in this different passion of theirs, which is the creation of a game, like for example a massive RPG or whatever. But all that changed as activists were welcomed into the industry. Suddenly, you couldn't just have this separate passion where you work on it. No, you gotta grab your passion and you gotta grab all the shit that's bothering you about the fucking world, all of your little politicisms, all the brain rot that you see online, and you gotta cram it into the game because the game has to be representative of you and your bullshit. So basically, again, in short, I'm not a moron. I understand and appreciate that there'll always be different people thinking different things, making my video games, making my music, making my movies and my TV shows, consuming what I put out even, living next to me as my neighbors, working next to me as my colleagues, etc, etc, etc. The grass is green and the sky is blue. Big surprise. But this level of extremism is ridiculous, and Xbox didn't just allow too much of it to take hold, they actively pursued it. Xbox isn't innocent in this. In fact, in some cases, this shit is born out of directives that Xbox itself has with their little socio-political initiatives. And when you invite activism into game studios, there's only ever one way out of it, and this is it. I've spoken about this many times before, so for the sake of that, I won't be repeating myself too much, but the idea is that when you foster a culture in a work environment that is comprised of people like that, much like what is also present at Obsidian, and if you watched my videos on Matt Hansen, then you will understand what I'm talking about. The truth is that you kind of let that take root. And then this is a conversation that a lot of people aren't ready to have yet, because their minds are too small. They only see what's in front of them. So basically, they'll tell you something like, none of this has anything to do with that. The unhinged activist was just a community manager. She didn't even develop anything for South of Midnight. Either they're being disingenuous or their brains are just straight up too small, because anyone could just think for about 5 minutes and wonder why is it that people like her get hired in the first place? Why people like her get protected when these things come to light? Why don't they ever just get fired like anyone else would if the roles were reversed? It's because there's an underlying ideology influencing the decisions that the people in these studios make, and the overall vibe in there. Like, let me put it this way. Who do you think would make a game that is far more likely to appeal to the majority of gamers out there? A group of Karens who are cucked enough to actually hire other activist Karens and consultant groups to come and help make their games more socially aware and more representative of minorities, more sensitively written to make sure no one gets offended, or just a group of guys who literally don't give a fuck about any of that and are instead shoved into an office, potentially one that's leaking, on their own, following a vision to make something like a dark fantasy RPG with zero regard for sensitivity committees or modernity? Shit, I know who I'd bet on. But this stuff alone is non-existent in the leadership of big AAA studios like the ones in the Xbox division. Besides working with activists like Anita Sarkeesian and Sweet Baby Inc., they also literally run these diversity quotas for representation and use lists like this, which are caked in creative restrictions based on modern sensitivities. This doesn't just affect the content, it affects ideas. It's more than enough to make a team go for a stupid, shitty idea that virtue signals to some subgroup or another, same kind of thing that 30 other game studios are already making right now, rather than go for an idea that actually fills a gap in the market. It's like, take a look at Obsidian. Do you want for them to maybe take another shot at Fallout? Would you like another Alpha Protocol, or would you like maybe perhaps a KOTOR game or something in that vein? Well, you can't fucking have it. You can have Avowed instead. Or another loosey-goosey RPG with the Outer Worlds 2. And so this is something Xbox did to themselves. Double Fine is another studio on the verge of getting shut down, if they haven't already. And they're the one that I talked about recently on my Anita Sarkeesian video, where I read their recommendation of having worked with her, where they're bending themselves backwards in worship of her and the amazing work that she apparently did at finding things that they missed because they were in blind spots, providing them with new perspectives on things that they didn't know about, and that prevented them from saying things with their cartoony-ass video game that they would never want to say, even accidentally. Oh goodness me, my god, our cartoony game was so offensive. It was literally going to send women's rights back to the 1850s, but thanks to Anita Sarkeesian, we were saved, and now our game does less harm. I think that was even the exact words that the moron used, that their game now does less harm. So it still does harm, oh shit, the harm is still there, but thanks to Anita, it's now much less harmful, like you might actually survive playing the game now, guys. Newsflash, you idiot, your original vision had nothing wrong with it, you got f***ed played by a grifter who came into your house, made up imaginary shit about your game, and got you to shell out capital for her to make the game lamer. I hope it was worth it now that you two face closure. And that, guys, is pretty much the crux of it. This is why I don't feel bad for these studios. They did it to themselves. The only thing I feel sorry is that more higher-ups at Xbox aren't following suit and getting their asses fired. They bought into a nasty poisonous culture, and instead of noticing how bad it was like some of us as the years have gone by and speaking against it, they instead chose to double down and force it against what the market actually demands. And now that the money is running out, now that these continued strings of flops are actually weighing on their wallets, we're getting the final solution: shutdowns. Because how else do you fix it? You can't even just fire some people, hire new ones, and expect the problem to solve itself, because again, the issue has been festering for so long that it became cultural. And when it becomes cultural, it transcends mistakes. Mistakes can be fixed, but the cultural problems are fully intended. Like, you can fix bugs, you can even fix bad writing or amateur presentation, but you can't fix a gaggle of Karens literally making sure that your protagonist is detestable or that your story is super safe and sanitized and socially aware to make sure that no one gets offended. And in the cases where you have developers working at your studio that openly state that they hate gamers and the sort of predominant culture that is gaming, you can't fix the shit that they will deliberately sabotage the game with in their pursuit of a modern audience. They're turning your games into weapons against the customer. That's essentially what's happening. Like, you can't even sit these people down and have a talk with them. All you can ever do is get rid of them. And if the problem ever gets so bad that you're on the verge of bankruptcy, then sometimes that's going to be a full shutdown rather than a couple of firings or even mass layoffs. Again, it just is what it is. We can't really say that we didn't warn them all the time though. But that's about it for this video, fellas. Bit of a rant there towards the end, but I hope it didn't detract from the core of the video. If you watched this far, thank you very much for doing so. Reminder to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Take care out there. Drink some water, fellas. Get some hydration breaks in. It's really hot out there, and play some good games in the meantime.